Well, I'm Dr. Farish A. Noor, and I'm Professor of Political History here at the Faculty of Social Sciences at Universitas Islam Internasional, Indonesia. My background is political history, but I bring to my work my earlier concerns and earlier disciplines that includes philosophy, literature, literary analysis, and philosophy of language. And that's really what I've been doing over the last 20 years.
So, in your expertise, what is your actual research interest?
Over the last couple of decades, I've returned to my original domain, which happens to be the politics of the 19th century here in Southeast Asia. I really tend to focus more on the ways through which Southeast Asia was not only colonized but also governed according to a certain colonial capitalist mindset in the 19th century. So much of my work involves looking not at the institutions of colonialism but rather the language of colonialism. And the reason why I'm attracted to this is because I have always believed that the vocabularies that we use today, the terms, the concepts that determine the way in which we live in the world and the way we look at the world, have really been inherited from the colonial past. And I think this is very evident in the case of post-colonial Southeast Asia, where when we look at the way in which Southeast Asian states and Southeast Asian societies view themselves, understand themselves, see their place in the world, we see the recurring use and the reliance upon the vocabularies and epistemologies and geographies of empire until today. So my argument has always been that we never really leave the colonial period because history is not episodic. And for us to understand the politics of the immediate present, we need to understand how and why the world around us today has really been shaped by the past. And so for me, history is not something that is episodic. You know, there's a tendency to talk about history in terms of a pre-colonial past, a colonial era, and a post-colonial era. But this suggests that history is somehow divided into episodes that are distinct. And for me, that's not the case. What we see in the world today are the traces of ideas, concepts, ways of looking at the world, ways of understanding society that date back to the 18th and 19th century. And that's really what I'm really interested in today.
Okay. So apart from the 19th century and also Southeast Asia, are there any other areas of interest that makes you really attracted to that particular era or century?
Well, because my background happens to be philosophy, and in particular philosophy of language, I'm very much attracted to the way in which language shapes our reality and constructs the world around us. So one recurring concern of mine, which doesn't just, is not just confined to the 19th century, but also today, happens to be the relationship between language and power, and how power, not only political power, but cultural capital, social power, social influence, how power is shaped by the workings of language. We tend to think of language mainly as a means of communication between individuals, but we forget that language is never private, it's public. And so the social nature of language, the way in which communities need to come together to agree on the meaning of terms, that I think is something that is very relevant to our understanding of politics. So whether we talk about development or national security or national interest, all these are not just words floating out there. These are ideas that are shaped through language, but they operate in a context of societies that are political in nature. And so I'm very much interested in the workings of language. Even when I study the history of colonialism, there are many historians who have studied colonialism in Southeast Asia, who have looked at, the wars that were fought, the institutions that were built. All of that is very valid, of course, and very important. But my own focus has been towards directed at the language of colonialism. I'm very interested in how colonialism was not only a political phenomenon, it was also a linguistic phenomenon. How do you colonize another country? How do you rob people of their land? You need some means of justification, and whether that ended up being an appeal to civilization or development or progress, these are all examples of how language works and how language provides you with a means to justify what you do. And what was true 200 years ago is equally true today. So if you look at the world around us, right, we live in a world where we talk about state rivalry, about security, about terrorism. All these things have to be understood in terms of how they operate in the field of language. And if we don't take that into account, then we do not interrogate the terms themselves. So we leave the concept of development untouched. We leave the concept of freedom or democracy or terrorism untouched in a very uncritical manner. And I think that is academically impoverishing for us. It actually doesn't help us understand how and why these concepts have come to become so important as they are today.
Okay, so here we can see that you've traveled many places, especially Asia, and we can see it through your office as well. You've put up many memorabilias of your travels. So, and you also became a professor in Malaysia, Singapore, Japan, and many more. But why back to Indonesia again? Why not just, stay in Malaysia? Or any other Southeast Asian countries?
Well, I spent half of my career in Europe. Yeah, I mean, I lived for 26 years in Europe, and the rest of my life in Asia. So I hope that I can be considered an international scholar, an international academic, and I've always felt that it was important to belong to a wider international academic community. That's what we all are. The moment you become a scholar, you join a global fraternity. You're part of, an academic community that is global in nature, because knowledge production is never something that is confined within, narrow political territoriality. My attraction to Indonesia in particular stems from the fact that I've been studying Indonesia since the 90s, and I consider myself an ASEANist. I'm very much a supporter of the idea of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and I'm very happy to be in Southeast Asia because I happen to think that Southeast Asia is one of the most interesting parts of the world. I'm not looking down on other parts of the world, but Southeast Asia is particularly interesting because of its history and because of its diversity. And this includes its academic environment. The academic community in Southeast Asia is one that is very vibrant, including here in Indonesia. Now, specifically, if you wanted to know why I chose to come to UIII, well, it's because I have established a large number of contacts here in Indonesia. I've always held the view that Indonesia is blessed by the presence of an astoundingly high number of very, very good Indonesian academics. But as we know, we live in a global environment that is not equal, and so in so many cases, good scholarship that comes from countries like Indonesia is not known abroad, partly because of the way in which English has become hegemonic as a language and what have you, even in academia. So my attraction to UII is largely because of the fact that it is an international university. It is a university that was created with the intention of showing to the world, showcasing to the world Indonesia's academic talent, its academic prowess and achievements, and also to build this rapport with other academics, other scholars, other universities and academic communities. And I think as an academic who has always had a very sort of international way of looking at things and wanting to be part of an international community, I think UIII in particular has created an environment that is very conducive to that.
Other than that, where do you see UIII in the future?
I think UIII can and should play a very important role in putting Indonesian academia on the global map. Yeah, because Indonesia has always had and has always produced a large number of very, very good scholars of global standing. The sad thing about the way the world is today is due to the hegemonic status of the English language. So much non-Western scholarship is not known to the world. Yeah, and we hardly get to read African scholarship in African languages. So that's partly because you and I don't speak any of the African languages or East Asian languages or what have you. Now the advantage that UIII has is that because its medium of teaching and its academic production is also in the English language, this offers us an opportunity to foreground the academic achievements of Indonesian academics to a wider international community, and also to engage with that other international community so that we can grow together. I hope that the UIII project will be supported in the years to come, because I think if and when it succeeds, it will play, I think, a very important role in Indonesia's future, because it will be one of those institutions that may be able to perform this bridge building and be able to actually place Indonesia in a pivotal position that it rightly deserves, because that was what it was set up for. So I think all of us who are here, who chose to be here, want to do this because we would like to see Southeast Asian scholarship also, make an impact in the world. And I think UIII has a very important role to play in terms of that long-term project.